introducing Mira Kingsley. Oh, wait a minute, this is always a obstacle course. It's always a great way to enter the room, staggering.
Friends are here, my feet are here, my tongue is here, my hands are here, my breath is here, my ears are here, my heart is here, my gut is here, my shins are here, my skin is here, my love is here, my fear is here, my sadness is here, my joy is here, my world is here. May all that is here be filled with peace. May all that are here come together today. May our hearts open wide. Everybody have a notebook? And pen? Everybody has a notebook and a pen. So thank you to everyone for coming and making the time in their day today. I know that that's no small thing to do. And for everyone who's watching from home, welcome. I've asked that we turn off our electronics during our time here. So if you haven't done that, if you would please do that, I would appreciate it. We won't turn off this electronic, but those of you that are at home, if you can turn off your phone, obviously leave your computer open, but clear the screen maybe so this is all you're seeing. It can be very difficult to enter into a space of transformation when you have objects around you that remind you of your daily status quo all the time, and a phone really does that. So aside from the fact that we have such a rare opportunity to be in the room and to share each other's energy here, and in case you didn't know, electronics actually do emit other types of energy, so you want to try to clear that space as much as possible. It can be a great gift to yourself just to turn off all your electronics in your home for a few hours. You don't have to do anything else, actually. Just enjoy. There's a real difference in the feeling in your home when you do that. So I thank you for agreeing to do that. And then as soon as the class is over, you can get back on there and check whatever you need to check. So it seems that in this realm, that there are a lot of rules. Rules like gravity. Rules like if I left my body, I would die. Rules like we are separate. There are many, many of them, spoken and unspoken, that we go through our day with. As one progresses along their spiritual journey, those rules, which are illusions, although they function for us, begin to dissolve. And we become closer and closer to the single rule of the universe, which is love, or graciousness, you could say. So when we find ourselves in the presence of love, either in the presence through another person or in the presence with our own heart opening, then we are moving along our spiritual path, and we note that other rules dissolve for us. And we see this throughout our society. The classic stories are like the mother who can lift the car to save her child, right? And then right after that, she can't do it anymore. So it can be helpful to remember that the intense feeling of bound physicality that we exist in most of the time, and the intense feeling of separateness that we exist in all the time, is just an illusion, but of course it functions. But as a rule for one place and one type of consciousness, and as we expand and deepen our consciousness, we will change, and the rules that we exist in will change. This means that we become a different person. We see the world differently. We see others differently. I wanted to have a space like this to address spiritual transformation, and I'm grateful to the center for allowing me to come and teach, and thank you to everyone who's continuing to keep the center going. It's such a valuable space. I was inspired to do this by my son when he was 6 weeks old, or 7 weeks old. He went through one of those things they call a growth spurt. And is anybody in here a parent? Yeah, okay, so y'all know. A growth spurt is an utterly harrowing event. Can be an utterly harrowing event. And they go, we go through them, particularly when we're young, constantly. But this was the first one that I really marked, really took a toll on me personally. He wasn't sleeping anymore. He wanted to eat every hour. When he wasn't eating, he was crying. And then he would wake up in the middle of the night, which of course they do anyway, but he would wake up more in the middle of the night. And there was such a look of terror in his eyes. And I remember very distinctly looking at him and feeling, I know this terror. I know this terror. This is the terror of transformation. We have some idea, particularly along the spiritual path, that we are going to get happier and happier and happier and happier. And we are, if we're moving well along our spiritual path. But But what is often not addressed is that at each level of transformation, our whole concept of what happiness is transforms. Our whole level of what peace is changes. Perspectives continue to change. And that the process of making that shift can include tremendous terror, tremendous discomfort, tremendous dis-ease. Doesn't have to, but it often does. Contains tremendous mourning for the loss of the person that we were, for the habits that we may be still clinging to even though we don't need them anymore, for things that perhaps we enjoyed that we no longer have interest in, but we would still like to enjoy them, but we're not interested in them anymore, friends that we've outgrown, relationships that we've outgrown, etc. So I was looking at my son and I felt I knew this terror, and I thought, I want to have a shared space to talk about this. And shortly after that growth spurt, he discovered that he had these things we call hands. I don't know what he calls them. But he was discovering during that time that those things were attached to his body. And now we look at it, and we sort of laugh, and it's very sweet. And I can go, oh, sweetheart, it's okay. They're just your hands. Don't worry about it. Just like the Buddhas or the great beings or the great teachers come to us and say, sweetheart, don't worry about it. It's just a little transformation. It's just your heart opening. It's just the groundlessness of wisdom appearing to you. But we're in the crib going, terrified, hitting ourselves in the head with our hand that we haven't discovered that we can use yet. She did it, over and over. And then there comes a period where we start to integrate the fact that we have these things called hands. And then there's a period where we practice, well, what do we do with these? And of course, what my son wants to do is put it in his mouth, taste it, to know it, because that's his initial way of knowing the world. So that there's a whole period of looking and trying to direct the thing, and it, he can't quite get it in, and so on and so forth. But we forget that we've gone through this process as children. And there's something in our society, perhaps, or in our culture, or in our mythology, that somehow we feel like we're done. And maybe it's because we graduate high school or we graduate college and we get a diploma, and then they sort of say, here you are, you're complete in some way. And as we progress along our spiritual journey, we have experiences where all of a sudden we discover, for instance, like my son discovering his hands, we discover, it's like, well, what if you discovered that you had 2 more arms that you never knew about? That would be pretty freaky, right? What if you discovered that you had all kinds of powers that you didn't know? As these rules that we feel so bound by start to dissolve and we move closer to the unison with the one rule of love, all kinds of powers come to us. So it can be helpful to remember that our evolution is not complete, that in a way we're very early actually in our evolution as beings and in our evolution of our consciousness. And there's so far to go. And those of us that have come to a space like this are dedicated in our lives to moving forward like that. So I think it's important to find how we can draw support for that journey. Because it can be a journey filled with a lot of terror and a lot of injury and a lot of discomfort, as well as a lot of bliss and joy and amazing feelings. So that was why I wanted to come to a space like this today. So I hope that it's of use to you, and hopefully we'll have time as we go through to share with each other, and I'll ask you to please feel free to share your voice freely. I'm not really interested in me being the only one speaking today. I'm more interested to hear what everyone here has to say. So I thought we would start by doing a meditation, and then I'll ask you to do some writing / drawing / however it comes out for you. And there's some containers here with a variety of colors of pens and pencils and crayons if you want to get creative as you move into your writing. So just to know that's there, you can feel free to get up. So we'll start with a meditation. So if you want to get yourself comfy for a meditation. Oops. Everybody good? Okay. So you could close or open your eyes. It's a little bit more conducive to close your eyes, but as you wish. If you feel any anxiety, if your mind is busy, your heart is busy, you can invite the earth to receive all of that energy. Imagine it flowing down through your body and out. Leaving you as a clear, open, empty vessel filled with breath, exchanging breath with all the other vessels in the room, seen and unseen. And then I'd ask that you bring your attention to sensing the unknown within yourself. Only you will know how to do this. And you will know how to do it by unknowing how to do it. So for the next period of time, we'll rest here in silence together, rigorously placing our attention on the unknown within our own being. move forward into the unknown. You can leave behind all that you know. Taking your time to lengthen your breathing, to make a transition. And if you wish to, we'll take another minute or two if you wish to make any notes for yourself, write anything down, draw anything, make marks on paper in some way. Or you could continue to sit. just for you. You can do it in any way that makes sense to you, is to make a map for yourself of the key landmarks in your own spiritual growth. So to make a map for yourself of the key landmarks in your own spiritual growth. Yes. Yes. To make a map for yourself. I think that's the first time anyone's asked me to be louder. To make a map for yourself of the landmarks in your own spiritual growth. Again, you could do this in any way that makes sense to you. So to just note times when for you very clearly you took a step, the world opened, the view of the world transformed for you, some of those laws fell away, you felt that you moved closer to that singular law of love, graciousness. And again, there's colored pencils should you wish. Your whole life, whatever that means to you, your whole life. And we'll take a good maybe 10 minutes to do this. So there might be times when you just need to rest in silence and let things come. as you go, see what happens if you extend your timeline. So whatever timeline you find yourself working in, be really radical with yourself and let it extend much farther into the past and much farther into the future. So perhaps past this lifetime, past, future. And just see what happens, see what comes up. About 2 more minutes here. We'll keep coming back to this through the class. It's in no way will be finished for any of us, but and then go ahead and look at what came forth for you and choose one of those events, moments, however they might have emerged for you. Particularly one that you felt like required a great risk. Perhaps if they're really a moment of spiritual leap, they probably do require risk. And once you have that, then Go ahead and close your eyes and just take yourself back into that moment, that time, that space. Recall where you were, what happened, how you felt. And ask yourself, how did you know? How did you know this was the way, this was the moment? How did you know this was a moment of spiritual growth for you? As opposed to all the other kinds of growth, ego growth, career growth, etc. How did you know? And when you have that sensation, whatever that is for you, see if you can rest your awareness solely on that. If you lose it, you can bring yourself back to the moment, the event, the images, the words, whatever it is that brought you there. Reestablish the sensation now of knowing, of clarity. Or perhaps it's not clarity, perhaps it's the clarity of being confused. Whatever it is that for you makes it undeniable that this is a moment of spiritual transition, spiritual transformation. And seek to merge yourself back into that, and you can let everything else fall away and rest there. And then gently let that rest. And again, if you want to make any marks on your paper in any way related to that, you're welcome to. Now, these spaces are certainly beyond language. So, as we offer the space to share language around it, we can acknowledge that we're already removed from the direct experience. And in that way, we can allow ourselves to be playful with our use of language, so we don't have to make sense. It already won't make sense, because these things that we're addressing don't fit into our normal sense of language, okay? So as we speak, and if you choose to speak, I just want to say that you can feel released from trying to explain something in a way that everyone will get. You could, if that feels meaningful to you, but you could also utter nonsense. You could also do a little dance. Exactly. Yeah, perfect, right? So these spaces that we'll share today are both a space for us to gain support for each other, but also if there's something that will benefit from that, we will absorb it and hold it as a community. Does that make sense for everyone? So I'd love if anyone wants to share in any way, how did you know? What does that mean? Why did you write that thing down? What is it in you? Yeah, please.
Mom was here last year, and I wasn't knowing nothing about the spiritual. And he was here for a 3-day workshop. This was last year, and my sister Lori has been coming to study Buddhism. And she talked me into coming to just one of his sessions. And I said, yeah, it was a weekend show. I'm busy. My son's in town. He was in San Diego. My son's in town, and he means the world to me. I don't see him that often. And she said, just come to one session, that's all. I came to one session, and then I stayed for the second session. And then Sunday was supposed to be our day, my son and my day, to do something. And I asked my son, do you mind if I go to this workshop? Because I just felt so connected. What he was talking about, it rang so true. I was like, I have to learn more. And that's how I knew, until he gave us this assignment, I never even really connected that's, that was it for me. So anyway.
The moment I chose to think about,
And just, I'm sorry, just to say, you don't have to tell us the moment. You're welcome
Yeah.
to. But I'm more
Yeah.
interested in just something about how you knew.
when this happened, I just felt a spaciousness in my life, just of possibilities and hope and wonder and excitement that just had been lacking for so many years, and it just opened. And just, I can feel the feeling now. If I go back and think about it, you brought all that back, which was wonderful. I didn't even realize how important that was at the time. I didn't know. It's just, when I see my life sometimes closing and then opening again, it's,
The moment I chose was not one of wonder and spaciousness. It was one of confusion and not getting what I wanted in a very important way, and not picking up my marbles and going home. Because and having a feeling of being in free fall. So one of the things I was trying to write about, and I don't have an answer for this, was because I had a sense that there was something that I trusted larger than what I was feeling, and I don't know what that is. So I was writing down different possibilities. I still don't know what that is. I don't know if it's that I trusted that, you know, and now I start to sound like Buddhist teaching. I don't know if I trusted, you know, my the teacher, the person who was teaching me, if there was something about the teachings, or if there was a profound sense of tapping into myself that was not, but that was also bigger than myself. I don't know.
I think it was, I've been kind of a seeker my whole life. But I think it was the moment I asked you to be my teacher. I remember, I mean, there's things that you don't remember, but then there's like, I remember the exact place where I was standing, and I think for me what it was when I heard these teachings, there was this ancient standing through the test of time kind of element to it that had great authority for me. And I think what I realized was that I wanted to achieve the ultimate state of awareness. And, you know, I've taken lots of like self-help, and I've taken a lot of workshops in my life, but none that really spoke of, okay, here are the steps to the ultimate space of awareness. And I felt like I trusted, you know. There was a trust and a love that was there. And I had no idea what I was getting myself into. Like no idea. Hey, you be my teacher. Like that's kind of how it was. And then I really didn't get the profundity of it until later. Which is, you know, kind of magical in and of itself. How the moment seemed kind of small at the time, but I didn't really realize the big, you know, monumental choice I was making. But something inside me was like, proceed.
The moment that I was thinking of, how I knew was that I disappeared, and in a way I think I hadn't ever before. And I'm thinking about these moments in my life where I expanded, where I had this spiritual expansion. It's hard to pinpoint like a moment. It generally occurs for me as more of a time frame, but this one time frame I was thinking of was when I was 17 or 18 and I was Africa, and I always think of this as like a big sort of awakening in my life, because it just changed my perspective so radically. But there's a moment that came to me that was really like the essence of this experience. And I was in this rainforest, and this African man, Rusizi, was teaching me to play the drums, and he took me into the forest and just said, okay, listen. And we sat there for a while and just listened to all these sounds, and it was so loud. And there was this music, and we had our drums, and then he said, now play it. And there was this experience of something so much bigger than myself, and then this merging with that in a way that was playful and joyful and creative, and in doing that, allowed me to disappear. And I mean, it was literally like, you know, I really see my life before that and my life after that as two totally different things. And yeah, it's like those experiences. It's interesting because I feel like in my earlier life there were more of these drastic, you know, wow, before that and after that I was totally different. It seems like as I get older, it's more subtle and more subtle. But conjuring that experience up was really helpful and just joyful and a wonderful space to go to.
Can you just read what I wrote, please? Going to Alan's meditation class for the first time. Now he was not my university professor, sitting up there on a chair on the stage of the Unitarian Church. He was delivering the teachings of the Buddha. I was being given permission to go within, to stay silent in a room full of people who were doing the exact same thing. It was intoxicating, this intimacy of stripping ourselves of language, of lectures, of talk, of chatter, to sit in such close proximity to each other in the oneness of silence.
So before you said, just I met myself for the first time.
So one, just to recognize that these spaces, these time frames, these moments are now. They are always now. So we can meet them if we wish at any time. And it can be very strengthening and helpful as we progress and become increasingly serious about the evolution of our consciousness, to be able to discern what marks true spiritual growth from status quo reinforcement or ego reinforcement. And oftentimes in the beginning, we don't have enough differentiation between those two, so our ego can very quickly jump on the spiritual growth and sort of grab it and say, oh yes, I will be a Buddha. However it manifests, right? I'm such a good meditator, whatever it might be. But to say that that does not negate the truth of the opening of whatever the moment was, that is always there for you. So as you continue your work and you begin to become more subtle about the differentiation between the sensation of the ignorance within yourself and the sensation of wisdom within yourself, then you can separate what is that term, the wheat from the shaft, or whatever it is, right? So that as you progress, you can more quickly go towards the wisdom. And as Mark said so beautifully, and I'm sure it's the case for all of us in different ways, there is a part of us that knows before the rest of us knows. And oftentimes, almost across the board, that part is not rational. And so we can't really explain in the moment why it is. that we are going towards, whatever we're going towards. Sometimes we just find ourselves. I remember this one time I was teaching here, and this gentleman came in and sat down, and I had never met him before, and during the break I was speaking to him, and I said, well, so how did you hear about the class? And he said, I don't know. I don't even know where I am. It was wild. I mean, he's like, I don't even know how I got here. What is this place? And it was as if, his story was as if he was driving on the highway, and all of a sudden he just found himself stopping and coming in to the class. And that happens to all of us. If we look back, that there are these moments where we sort of go, why am I, or as it's happening, it's like, why are these words coming out of my mouth? Or, how did I end up here? But there's something that knows. That knowing, in Buddhism, we have a term for it. It's called the clear light. We also could call it Buddha nature. There are terms for it in all kinds of traditions. It is the unblocked essence of the universe. And in Buddhism, we call it the clear light because it is marked by two primary qualities: clarity and luminosity. Clarity and luminosity. Robert Thurman, for those of you that know Robert Thurman, great scholar and teacher and practitioner of Buddha Dharma, he calls it the most intelligent force in the universe, the most intelligent energy in the universe. When Mark speaks of coming to the height of the evolution of one's awareness, as far as we know to discuss on this plane, we're speaking of coming into contact with the clear light, and then integrating and identifying with the clear light, rather than say your name to yourself or whatever else you might, all the other labels and overleaves that you sort of throw on yourself. So in these moments of spiritual growth, we become closer to the clear light, and the intelligence of the clear light is what comes through. So when we look back, we go, oh, the clear light is saying, by the way, do you mind if I go to this workshop? Even though you're like, but I was going to spend the day with my son. And the way they speak in the text is that ignorance, all the forces of ignorance, can't hold up for a millisecond against one moment of that kind of wisdom. And so when that kind of wisdom comes through, everything else, it doesn't matter. Whatever other plans we had, what other ideas we had about ourselves, it doesn't matter, because we're in the stream of clarity and luminosity. Okay? So that's just to give you those terms, because those can be helpful as you progress. When you sense that clarity and that luminosity, go towards that. Go towards that. Like in Poltergeist, right? Like, go towards the light, But really, it is both the thing that joins all of us, but it is also manifested completely personally within each of us. So you must begin to know for yourself what the feeling is within yourself when you're going towards that. Okay. And then just to say that there are generally, it's nice that Jenny spoke about it as a time frame, because there are generally sort of 5 steps. And in Buddhism, these are parsed out into what are called the 5 paths. And I'm not giving a teaching on the 5 paths today, but if you're interested, you could request a teaching here on the 5 paths. But smaller versions of those 5 paths happen within each transformation. And so generally, there's some kind of clarity of interest, some kind of awareness that there's something that you want to move towards. And then there's a preparation for the receiving of the wisdom, or there's a preparation to enter the experience. In child development, they call it their pre-efforts. They're pre-efforts before the actual effort. So like, again, for those of you that are parents, it's like you watch your child do all this stuff before they can actually take a step, right? We're doing pre-efforts all the time that we're not aware of because we don't know the step yet that it's connected to. It's only once we've made the step that in a way we look back and say, oh, those were all the pre-efforts. So you could, we won't do it within this time together, but it can be also very beneficial for you in your path to choose one or a number of these events, moments that you wrote down on your list, and then to go back and look at what your pre-efforts were. Like what brought you to the ability to know that or to enter there, okay? And then there's the actual experience, the direct experience of transformation where, as Jenny was saying, you make the shift from one moment, one type of being to another type of being. In the larger path, this is marked by coming into a direct experience with the clear light. You completely fall away, you integrate with the clear light. When you come out of that experience, you are no longer the person you were before. Completely different person. Another one is when you become a fully awakened being. You are no longer who you were before. You must be called by a different name. Okay? We have versions of these in our societies that are ritualized, like marriage, where we take a new name, although most people don't take a new name anymore, but, you know, or when you get, like, I remember when I started teaching at the university, all of a sudden people were calling me professor, and I was sort of like, why are you calling me professor? And it's like, oh, that, like something's been marked and now I'm looked at in a different way. Now that's not a spiritual transformation, that's a career, but it's, you know, related in terms of the shift in how people are seeing you. Then after the experience, there's the process of stabilization of the view that you have had. And this is where most of us fall away. So I think if you ask anyone, they've had some kind of transformative spiritual experience in their life, but many people have not been given the tools or a practice to stabilize that experience. And that is where the hardcore work comes in. You've got to stabilize it, or it's still in your being, but it rests as just a sort of flash in a pan for you. And then very easily the ego can take it over and it starts to turn into like a story you tell at parties. You know, oh, that time I saw that great teacher Lama Marut, that was awesome. And on with your life, right? So it's really important for all of us to recognize when those moments happen, you gotta grab onto them and then go towards them with all your might. And the more you go towards it, the more resistance you'll actually find. Chances are. Not necessarily, but chances are. As you get deeper, the harder it is to go, okay? And then after the process of stabilization, you could also call that a process of integration, okay? Then you come to a space where you have fully integrated that experience, so it's no longer something that you're trying to work on or trying to aspire to or coming to. It is who you are. Then it is an effortless flow from you, whatever that might be. Okay. And so obviously we can look at these steps in any kind of acquiring of a skill or something like that. You know, I have an interest in playing piano, then I have to like go through the pre-efforts, I have to find a teacher, I have to maybe find a place to practice, I have to find the funds to pay the teacher, I have to like, you know, figure out how I'm gonna fit it into my schedule, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Maybe I have to go to a bunch of lessons. And then there's the moment where you go, I can play the piano. Where you sit down and you're like, da, 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 right? And then your teacher goes, good, all right, you've just started. And then there's the process of riding that feeling of I can play the piano. Don't let that fall. Then you've got to go, yeah, I'm going to play Bach, I'm going to play Beethoven, I'm going to play Bob Dylan, I'm going to keep going, to keep practicing. And then there's the place where you could maybe step away for a year, 2 years, but you could come back and play the piano. It's there, it's part of you. You are a piano player. Yeah. So for each of the steps in our spiritual life, we can go back and look at them. For each of these things that you've written down, have you been able to stabilize them? Have you been able to carry them through? Have they been fully integrated? And if not, you can still do that because they're still there. they're open. Those are open spaces. Okay. So key to have a practice. The deep evolution of our consciousness does not occur by chance. It does not occur by chance. And this is said again and again in the texts. Those moments might appear, the moments of awakening, those are moments of grace for sure. But the moments to have the awakening and then to stabilize the awakening don't occur by chance. The stabilization occurs through intensive focus, okay? So we'll take a little break, but before we do, take a little pause, I should say. I'd like to do something for fun, which is I'm going to ask each of you to give yourself a different name. And so I'll just take you into a little meditation, and then you can rename yourself. And then I would just ask, as we're in the pause, if you see someone, you can just call them by their new name. Okay? Because otherwise, we go into the break and you say, hi, Tanel, and everything that is Tanel comes to Tanel. You see? So instead, you can say, hi, whatever she's got on her shirt. And she'll be like, huh, what? And then a little bit of space will be there, okay? So you can just pass these around. And if you have like 50 names for yourself, there's plenty of stickers. So, it doesn't have to be one. And if anybody online wants to send Dima their new name, then we can happily call you by your new name, your name for the class today, okay? So we'll just do a very short meditation to have this arise. So come back to your seat. Close your eyes. And if you can, reconnect with that space of the unknown within yourself. Which is one side of the double-sided coin of the knowing, the clarity, and the luminosity of the clear light. So the knowing that is beyond our current knowing is one way to speak about it. The unknown beyond our current state of knowing is another way to speak about it. So bring yourself into the awareness of that. Let yourself dissolve into it. Invite yourself to dissolve into that unknown spaciousness or that clarity and luminosity of a knowing that is far beyond any individual knowledge, any single self. And now from that space, allow a name to come forth. You're allowing yourself to be named. And trust whatever it is that comes forth, it is correct. That's exactly right. And when you have it, go ahead and write it down and Hey, I got gobble gobble. So whatever comes is perfect. And let's take a pause for 15 minutes, so till 3 o'clock. And as I usually do, I would ask that you stay mindful in this time. This is just a little playful way to remember whatever space it is that you want to hold open for yourself for this time today, honor that. And so if that means that you would prefer to be in silence and not to socialize, then you may want to take a walk outside or something like that. So just be mindful about your conversation during this space if you choose to converse for yourself and for others. And we'll come back at 3 o'clock.
Testing, testing. 1, 2, 3. Very nice.
Cloud, I hear that you're online. Among others, no doubt. So I'd like to tell you a story. This story has been with me for many years, and I've told it many times, probably many times in classes that some of you have been in. But like any story that arises from a higher consciousness, which the story does, like wisdom, which is unchanging, although we change, so every time we come to it, something new arises for us. So for me, personally, this story is like a well, and every time I come back, I find some kind of water that nourishes my thirst in it in a new way. And that's been no exception this time as I've looked through it. This story is from the Sutra of Golden Light, and it's chapter 18 in that sutra. And there are readings, and you can, I've printed I actually have not printed the chapter. Geneva, thank you to Geneva for printing the chapter, I said to her. Printed the chapter for all of you, and you're welcome to take it home and read it after the class. I will say that this is one version of many, many versions of this story. So if you find yourself interested in this particular tale, you're welcome to contact me. I can connect you with other versions of the story. But I say that just to say that as I tell you, the telling will already deviate from the chapter. And to recognize that this particular telling is not only one of many tellings, but is a translation of a Sanskrit telling of the tale. So it's already one translation which could be translated many ways. So just to know that there's some fluidity in there. So this is called the chapter on the tigress. So once upon a time, now and forever, the Buddha was walking with his disciples, a couple thousand or so of his disciples, through a forest. And they came upon a spot, an open spot, with lush green grass and beautiful flowers. And the Buddha, who, whenever the Buddha is walking, is projecting rays of wisdom and compassion out, which are touching all of the realms and transforming beings constantly, pauses for a moment and says, "This is a beautiful place. This is a fitting place for a Dharma teaching." And he asks Ananda, his closest disciple, and for those of you that don't know, Ananda means bliss, so he asks Bliss if Bliss would lay a seat for him so that he could give a teaching. So he's inspired by this place. And so, of course, when the Buddha asks you if you would lay a seat for a teaching, you do. And so Ananda lays a seat, and when the seat is prepared, he says, "Oh, holy teacher, your seat is prepared. Would you please teach us?" And so the Buddha sits down, and he asks all of the beings there, he says, "Would you like to see the remains of a being who performed tasks that are very difficult to perform?" And all of his disciples answer, "Yes, we would like to see the remains of this being. It is fitting that we see the remains of this being. It is the exact right time that we see the remains of this being and that we hear this tale." This is an excellent teaching on Guru Yoga right here. If your teacher asks you if you would like to hear something, you say yes. Although we're notorious for saying, "I think I already heard that one. Do you have some other teaching?" Or, "Well, I don't know if I'm ready for that teaching yet." Or, "Actually, I'm ready for another teaching. Why are you teaching me this? I'd rather you teach me that." Right? Or, "I don't have time for this teaching. I have something else to do. I've got, got a different job today," or whatever it is, right? But these are the Buddha's disciples, and they've got the Guru Yoga thing down, so they just say, yes, it is the perfect time. It is exactly right, the teaching you're about to give us. Please, and then they say something like, you who have transcended all ignorance, you who are the rays of glory, please, fill us like perfect vessels. And so the Buddha raises his palm and places it on the earth, and the earth shakes in 6 ways. And he draws from the earth a stupa. So he transforms the earth and raises from the earth a stupa. And he says to Ananda, Ananda, would you open this stupa? And Ananda opens the stupa, and inside there's a beautiful urn, a golden urn laid with jewels. And Ananda says, there's a beautiful urn in here with jewels, golden. And the Buddha says, yes, would you open the urn? And so Ananda opens one urn, and there's another urn inside. And he opens the next urn, and there's another urn inside. And this goes on for 7 urns until he gets to the final urn. So this is related to opening the 7 focal points of power within our being. So as Ananda is opening these 7 urns, these 7 focal points of everyone who's present are beginning to open until they get to the place where they're completely ready to receive this teaching. And when the last urn opens, Ananda finds bones that are pearly and lily white and beautiful. And the Buddha says, what is there? And he says, there are relics here. There are relics in this urn. And the Buddha says, yes, everyone should bow and pay homage to these relics. Now, in our time, we don't pay much mind to relics. But objects, and particularly objects of the physical body, hold great power. They hold energy. And this is something we've forgotten in this time. It becomes something somewhat fantastical, we have such little belief in the power of form and in the power of the human body. We have such disregard for form that we don't trust things like this. But the original meaning of to become like a blood brother or a blood sister with someone is that you mingle your blood so that when that person has passed, you can connect with them beyond the dead because you have the vibration of that being within your body. So there's all kinds of magic that one can do with relics. So here they are, and he says, please, everyone should bow to these relics, pay homage to these relics. And Ananda says, teacher, you are venerated beyond anybody. The gods venerate you. Everyone in the whole universe venerates you. How is it that you are venerating these bones? And the Buddha says, Ananda, without these bones, I wouldn't be here. It is because of these bones that I am able to be here with you and to give you this teaching. And he says, once there was a king called Maharatha. Maharatha means great chariot. And for those of you that may know, in the Indian way of breaking things down, the body is often referred to as a chariot. The horse, like our feelings, right? The reins and the driver, like our mind, and then the person in the carriage is the master, the mastermind. So he's Maharatha, this great chariot, this king. And he has 3 sons who are like the sons of gods. The first son is named Mahadeva, great god. The second son is named Mahapranada, great sound. And the third son is called Mahasattva, the great being. Great God, great sound, great being, body, speech, mind. And one day, Maharatha wants to go to the park for sport. And his sons come along with him. And they're in the park and they're playing, picking flowers. Like, I guess teenage boys do, pick flowers. This is what it says in the story. They're tender souls. They're enjoying picking the flowers of the park. And then they come to the edge of a great forest, one of 12 forests that make a dark forest complex of 12. And as they are at this edge from the known to the unknown, Mahadeva says, brothers, I feel a great fear that if we enter this forest, we will meet some wild beast and harm is going to come to our bodies. And Mahapranada says, brothers, I do not fear for my body, but I have great anxiety that if we enter this forest, that we will be separated from those that we love and from all the comforts of the home that we know so well. And Mahasattva says, brothers, here at the edge of this forest of solitude, acclaimed by all great seers, I feel neither fear nor do I feel anxiety, but I feel a great hope that in this forest is my destiny. And he begins to go forward. And so clear is his conviction that his brothers go with him. And they begin to walk through the forest, and as they do, all their attendants who are in the park sort of go off on their own and forget about the brothers. And they begin to get deeper and deeper and deeper into the forest. And then they come upon a clearing. And in this clearing, they see a tiger. Now, Mahadeva goes, what did I say? I told you. Here it is. All of my fears are coming true. Right? Mahapranada's going, see, I knew it. Never going to see my home again. Never going to see my mom and dad. It's all over. Okay? And Mahasattva's going, I knew it. I knew it. Here it is. And as their eyes adjust, they see that this is a mother tiger. And she's given birth probably about a week ago. She has 5 cubs. And she's very weak and sick. And the cubs are nearly starving. And as their eyes adjust to this sight, they begin to feel the intense sadness of this situation that they've come upon. And Mahasattva says, what is the food of this being? And Mahadeva says, well, the food that's fit for tigers is fresh meat. And Mahapranada says, well, the tiger is sick. The tiger can't hunt. This is a really horrible predicament. Either the tiger is going to die or she's going to be forced to eat her own children. Either way, I don't want to see either of them. I want to get out of here. And Mahasattva says, well, would anybody give their life for the tiger? And Mahadeva says, well, now, that's a nice thought, but no, let's be realistic here, okay? There's no being here that's going to give their life for the tiger. We just have to face the facts. Mahapranada says again, just have to face the facts. We got 2 options here, the tiger dies, or the tiger's going to eat her cubs. It's really sad, we should go home. And Mahasattva says, well, no, we probably wouldn't do that. We couldn't do that. So attached are we to what we know. He says, but I know that there are great beings who would do something like that. So here he remembers that there's some model, and it's not detailed in the story where he's heard about this. If he has a teacher, or if he's read about the Buddha, a Buddha, something like that. But he has a model for beings with extraordinary compassion and extraordinary wisdom, and they come to him in this moment. And then he looks at the tiger for a long time without blinking. And then they go on their way. And as they're leaving the forest, all of a sudden, Mahasattva stops. And he says, brothers, I need to return into the forest for a personal thing. I particularly like that in this translation. I'll see you soon. And he leaves, and the other brothers continue home. And he returns to the place where the tiger is. And very mindfully and very calmly, he removes his clothing, and he hangs his clothing on a tree very neatly. And then he comes and he lays down in the same position the tiger is in, right next to the tiger, and looks at the tiger. And nothing happens. And he thinks to himself, this poor tiger is so weak, he needs more assistance. So he gets up and he looks around for something sharp, doesn't see anything immediate, so he breaks off a piece of bamboo and he spends some time sharpening the bamboo branch. And then he comes back, he kneels right next to the tiger's head, leans over, slits his throat so he falls right into the tiger's mouth. When this happens, in the moment that this happens, again, the earth shakes in 6 ways. The sun goes dark. Flowers fall from some unknown realm onto this realm. And a goddess appears who's been inspired by these actions and begins to sing. And as she sings, she calls forth the intention that Mahasukha set before he did this, which is that with this action may he reach enlightenment. With this action of compassion may he reach the highest state of his mind. And she recalls that and says, yes, this will happen. Now, also at this same moment that the goddess appears and Mahasukha falls into the tiger, his mother back at home is taking a nice nap, a nice afternoon nap. And she's struck with a horrible nightmare. She sees 3 doves, and a hawk comes down and snatches one of the doves and eats one of the doves. And she wakes up and her breasts are pouring milk, and she watches as the milk turns into blood. And she knows that something has happened to one of her sons. And so she starts calling and she says, where are my sons? What's happened to my sons? And the king has come home and he says, nothing's happened. They're at the park. They're just playing at the park. And she says, you have to go find my sons. Also, at the same moment that this happens, the 2 brothers who are now on their way home, they experience the earth shaking. They experience the sun going dark. They experience all of a sudden strange flowers falling all over them. And they go, oh, something's happened. And Mahadeva says, I'm really concerned that our brother has fed himself to that tiger. He seemed really interested in that idea. And Mahapranada says, I am too. And so they turn around and they rush back into the forest, and they come to the spot where it occurred. And all they see are some bones and some blood, what is left of their brother, and the tiger looking totally resplendent. And they go completely senseless. They black out. The father, Maharatha, with all kinds of ministers and chariots, come into the park and they go into the forest. And they too come to the scene. And they see what has occurred. They all black out. Eventually they come back. They revive. They come back to the mother. They say, this is what has happened. She hears it. She blacks out. Then the mother and the father together go to where it happened to see the remains. Again, they black out. What has happened, they can't hold. Their mind can't hold. And then there's a process of extraordinary mourning from the whole kingdom. And then eventually they place the bones, they place the relics of their son into an urn, and they bury the urn in that spot. At the end of the story, the Buddha says to Ananda, he says, Ananda, if you think that Mahasukha and I and that time and this time are different, do not see it like that. He says, we are the same. And because of that action, I was able to reach my enlightenment. I was reborn in this body. He says, Maharatha, the father of Mahasukha, was my father. The mother of Mahasukha was my mother, Queen Maya. The tiger was my mother's sister who became the first nun of the Buddha. The 5 cubs were the first 5 disciples. When the Buddha comes down after reaching his enlightenment, he comes across his 5 students that he had left, and they become the first 5 monks. He says those were the 5 cups. And my 2 brothers are Manjushri and Maitreya, 2 of my closest disciples who reach enlightenment during the Buddha's lifetime. Such a vast vision. And he doesn't say they are now those beings. And so he says, this is possible, this is what is required, this kind of compassion. And then there's this very beautiful statement that because he has told this story, during the process of telling this story, thousands of people have been released from their pain, just simply by telling the story. It's, again, such a vast and beautiful vision. And then he goes on and he tells the story a second time in verse. And the second time he tells the story, it's slightly different in the sutra. And I'll just mention one of the details that's different because I think it applies to our topic today of change, is that the second time he tells the story, Mahasukha leaps off a cliff into the tiger's mouth. And so I think about these 2 ways that we go about transformation. Sometimes our transformation is very methodical and mindful. We know where we're going. We take the steps we need to take. We're very present in the process. And then sometimes we just take a leap. We don't know what's going to happen. I remember when I first read that he took a leap, I thought, well, if he took the leap, he might have hit another rock and bounced off and got some other place and the tiger couldn't get to him. And, clearly I'm the methodical kinds, right? I was I'm really into taking the clothes off, getting the bamboo stick sharpened, But there are some people that are probably yeah, just jump off the cliff, right into the tiger's mouth, clothes and all, everything together, right? So different personalities of how we go about transformation. So before I say much more about the story, what I'd love is for each person here to just write down at least one, but maybe 5, something like that, things that struck you or questions that came up for you as you were listening, whatever those might be. And they don't even need to be about the story. Maybe you had a memory while you were listening to the story that struck you or something. So I'd like to go through the story together and unpack it a little bit. And as we do, we'll come to steps and ways that we can empower our process of spiritual growth. And please feel free if questions come up, or if you wrote down a question and we're at that point in the story, please feel free to ask it, or if there's something else that you want to share as we go. So, the first thing I want to bring up is that as the Buddha is walking, he sees this place and he's inspired by the beauty of the place. And this is key, that wherever it is, however it is that we receive a Dharma teaching, if it is a Dharma teaching, it is accompanied by beauty. When you look at the, actually this one doesn't have it so much. Oh yeah, no it does. When you look at traditional tankas or traditional images of teachings, this of course is a teaching, you'll always see a little table with sense objects laid out, something for the mouth, something for the sound, music, something for the eye. And this is that we're brought into the truth. We're, as embodied beings, we're all embodied, as beings on the physical plane, we're brought to the highest truth through our senses, through the beauty of our senses. So we're brought to the ultimate beauty through physical beauty. Now, we also have to recognize that there's no one paradigm for physical beauty. That's some idea that we latch onto in the society very strongly. So it's not really about what the thing looks like, it's what's coming through it. But as you go through your day, there is great wisdom in making the space around you beautiful and making a space beautiful for other people. And to notice that if you go back to those moments in your life that you wrote down, there was a beauty there. Again, it doesn't necessarily have to be physical beauty, but there was a beauty there that comes forth. So whenever the Dharma is taught, there's beauty. The word handsome, the etymology of the word handsome, which is of course related to the word beauty, something's handsome, right? Is something that is good, something that has ethical goodness. So there's a connection there. So I'm not talking about physical beauty in a kind of social way. I'm speaking about the beauty that is an ethical beauty that inspires your heart. And nature, great nature does that, because nature is inherently ethical in its own wild way, right? So he comes to this beautiful spot and he asks Ananda to lay a seat. After he sets up the seat, I'll just read you this now from this particular translation, because it's a beautiful, again, teaching on Guru Yoga. This whole first part is a teaching on how to relate to one's teacher. He says, "The seat is laid, O transcendent Lord, chief and supreme among bipeds." Bipeds. Not four-peds, but freeing beings from bondage, you bestow supreme benefit upon humans. Be seated, and may the nectar of sublime discourse for the benefit of humans kindly be given. And then, again, the Buddha asks, would you like to see these remains? And the monks reply, O sublime sage, the time is right for us to see the remains of one, the best of supreme beings, in whom rested inconceivable virtues of immense patience, fortitude, and wisdom. Delight in calm humility and the mind of recollection, tell us well. So there's this extreme sense of setting up the person that you are with through your language. The reason why this is so important is that the way we name something is what it becomes for us. So even though we sort of laugh, it's really a little bit over the top. It's not for the Buddha. it's for Ananda. If Ananda says, you are a transcendent Lord, chief and supreme among bipeds, then that is who he begins to see. And then he can begin to receive teachings from that being. Do you understand? It's very important. It's very important. So as we go through our life, to be mindful of how we speak to others, to try to set others up in the highest way, and then they can act that way for us. They can't if we don't, actually. They won't if we don't. And of course, you need to do it in a way that is, relative to the situation. So you don't want to like freak someone out. But, it's enough just to go to your work and, say, whoever, so-and-so, you look beautiful today. I'm so happy that I'm speaking with you. Do you have anything you want to share with me? Just sweetly, speaking sweetly to others and giving them the opportunity for them to step into their highest self so you can receive that from them. And when others speak to you in that way, allow that to happen. So be mindful that you don't do that thing that we do where it's like, no, I'm just a crappy person. Nah, we undercut ourselves all the time. That's not being generous to the other person. So if the other person is seeing you in a good light, that's awesome for them. You're not important, you see? It's for them. So try to meet that. It's good for them to see you in a good way. Why are you trying to convince them that you're a big schmuck? Why are you trying to convince them that you're ugly or stupid or whatever it is you're trying to convince them? Just say yes, okay. Inside, some part of you should be going, I'm not one or the other, actually. I'm not gobble gobble. I'm not Mira. I'm not Lama Mira. I'm not any of those things. So whatever you see, I'll meet. I'll try to meet. And if you're seeing something negative, I'll try to offer you the best of me. So this is the way you serve a teacher, and the way you can serve all beings, is really to lift them up through your speech. And this is the way we create, one of the ways in which we can create spiritual change for ourselves, is that we can take others up to a place that we haven't reached yet, so that they can act that way for us, and then we can match that, you see? It's very practical, very practical. Another facet of the Dharma is that if it's not practical, it's not the Dharma. But not practical in the way our society usually thinks of practical. Just practical from the heart. Like, yeah, that makes sense. If I call someone an asshole, they're going to be an asshole to me. That's just practical, right? So then he strikes the earth with his hand. And this omen occurs of the earth shaking in 6 ways. And this is a very powerful thing that occurs in the majority of sutras and at different points throughout the sutras. When the earth shakes in 6 ways, what this is pointing to, we are the earth. Our bodies are made of the earth. When we encounter a transformative teaching, our earth shakes. The 6 ways are related to our 6 sense consciousnesses. Our eyes, our nose, our taste, our hearing, and our sense of our body or our touch is disoriented in that moment. So oftentimes when we enter a moment where we are about to transform, we become disoriented. Now, if you're anything like me, you don't like to be disoriented. It's not a pleasant feeling for most of us. It's disorienting, right? So we do everything we can in that moment to get reoriented, which is usually to sort of go back to our status quo. It's going to be helpful to think about what are the ways in which you try to reorient yourself when you're disoriented. Do you check your phone? Do you check your email? Do you scratch your face? We have all these little habits all day long where we go, this is how I get myself back into myself that I know. The teaching, when the Buddha is coming through, the Buddha is shaking you, shaking your senses out, because you can't make a leap in the senses as you currently have them. You need to call in a new vision, a new way of hearing, a new way of tasting, a new way of smelling, a new way of feeling the world. Okay? So in all the sutras, when the earth shakes in 6 ways, it's an omen that a Dharma teaching is coming, that a big transformation is coming. They say that it is the also the appearance of the beneficial parts of the senses arising and the disappearance of the earthly desirous ways we use our senses. So next time you feel disoriented, take a pause there, because that could be a great omen for you. And again, if you can recognize it as an omen, if you can say, whoa, like, something just happened and I feel really off my game, maybe this is an omen of a Dharma teaching. Maybe this is an omen of a transformation, spiritual transformation about to come. Maybe I'll just see if I can rest here in that kind of disorientation and openness. And there are quick earthquakes and there are slow earthquakes. Sometimes your earthquake, as Jenny said, what did you say, time frame, is a time frame. That could be a year, it could be 5 years, it could be a month, it could be a few days. And sometimes it's very quick, right? So again, to say these moments of spiritual transformation, they put us into eternal time. We click out of horizontal time. So be prepared that sometimes you'll go through long periods of disorientation in your spiritual transformation. It's okay. It's powerful. So then we come up with the urn, and we go through, as I mentioned, the opening of these 7 power points in the body. And this is a whole other teaching, but just to say that there is our gross physical body, and then there is the subtle energetic body. And when we make a spiritual transformation, there is always a dissolving to some extent or another, either quite extreme or in a small way, of the gross physical body, and a touching base with our more subtle energetic body. So again, you can sort of sense within your own life when you feel like you're maybe starting to disappear in some way or another in your physical body. If we take substances, if you get drunk or you take drugs, you've experienced that in some way or another. Your gross physical body is so disoriented it goes away. It's some form or another, right? And another type of energy comes forth. So this is the dissolution of these laws that I was talking about, the laws that bind us on the physical plane. As we get higher and higher up in the planes of consciousness, the physical laws of the gross physical body, eventually the subtle physical body, and on and on and on, those dissolve away. I said a little bit about the relics already, so I'll just leave that for now. So then he begins to tell the story. We all have our park. We all have the place that we feel comfortable to play in, that is known for us. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's wonderful to play in the park and pick flowers. It's joyous. But in order for us to move forward and to accomplish what it is that we are all here to accomplish in this lifetime, something that I think that you all know, if you look in those moments of transformation that you wrote down, there is a knowing in those moments, I imagine, that is akin to something like, this is it. This is what I'm here for. Everything is right. I know where I'm going now. Does that ring true for people? Even sometimes in the moments like Lama Lauren was speaking about, the disoriented moments, you realize, I don't like the way this feels, but for some reason I'm still here. This must be my path. This must be it. We are here for a reason. We can get pulled off of that by so many things. It is so easy to get pulled off and to get distracted. It can be helpful for all of us to try to note what our primary distractions are and to note them so that when they come up, we can try to remind ourselves of that feeling of this is it and say, does this action align with that space? And if it doesn't, why am I doing it? And you might have good reasons for doing it in that moment, and that's good. You know, you might say, well, I need to do it because right now I need to make some money because I have a child and I have to feed my child. Okay, sounds good, you know. Eventually, you can come to a space where you have aligned everything within that pathway that feels like this is the pathway. It doesn't necessarily mean you have to change the outer actions. It means you change how you're relating to them. You see where they're all going, okay? So there's the park, there's what we know, and then there's this threshold into the unknown. Now, on one level, we could talk about this as the entrance into a meditative practice. In our spiritual path, there must be a profound investigation of the inner space. We all have some idea when I say meditation, something comes up. You know, maybe it's a person floating, sort of looking like this, and that could be one way of meditating. But there are thousands of ways to meditate. There are thousands of ways to explore the inner space, but you must go into the inner kingdom. At the threshold of the inner kingdom, you will absolutely encounter the two poles of my body and everyone I know, all that is mine. My comfort, my house, my job, me, etc. So these are these two brothers that come up. And again, these brothers are important because when you leave the forest, you are with the brothers. You're in your body and you're in your life with your friends and your family and all of that, and you need to know how to relate to those things. So when the Buddha becomes enlightened, when you become enlightened, when you realize your enlightenment, you are in a body. You come back, if you come back to this plane, you're in a body. You have friends. Not like the Buddha comes back and goes, I never had a mother, I never had a father. I have no family, I have no son, right? He comes back, he goes back to his mother and father, he goes back to his son, he goes back to his wife. He remembers his world, he remembers the people he knew beforehand. But he's totally different the way he relates to them, okay? But know that when you are at that threshold of entering, and any of you who have meditation practice for any period of time will probably know, you sit down, immediately you got to deal with your body. I'm a little uncomfortable, my butt hurts, I have scratch, it's too loud outside, you know, I don't like the smell from the kitchen. The body becomes so loud, okay? And that is Mahadeva going, I don't want to go in there. I don't want to go in there because something's going to hurt, something I'm going to get rid of. There's some part of you that knows if you go all the way to the tiger and go through your tiger, your body's not going to be the same anymore. Okay? So Mahadeva will certainly come up. And then definitely Mahapranada is going to be there going, what about my husband? What about my wife? What about my brother? You know, you just think of whoever it is that comes up for you, right? The person that if, as my teacher used to say and still says, if the angel drives up in the car outside and says, get in, we're going to heaven, who do you go, hold on, let me just call my mother, right? Hold on, let me just put in a call to my husband and say I might be home a little later than I thought. That mind will stop you from going through to your full transformation. It is not in that person's or that people's best interest for you to pause. It doesn't benefit anyone for you to hold back your own spiritual transformation, because really it's not about them, it's about you being attached to something that you know and being fearful, because certainly as you change, they will change because we're interconnected. So there's some idea that we have. I remember when I was pregnant, and I don't know, Jenny, if you've gotten this, you know, people see you when you get pregnant and, you know, or just afterwards, and they say like, oh, don't worry, you'll get your body back. And I always remember thinking like, did someone take my body away? You know, in some ways you'd be like, yes, the child took your body away, you know, but there's this intense ferocity that we have in this culture of like, you'll get back to who you were. There's a little transformation, but then you'll get back. You don't get back. You don't go back. There's no going back. There's only transforming forward. And so if we're attached to like, I want to get back to who I was, we're really in a hell realm. One, because it's impossible. And two, because then you're holding yourself from seeing all the possibilities of what you've just stepped into. So this is not just about the body, but about relationships too. If we're attached to our relationships having to stay the same, you know, we have this feeling like, I'm thinking of you and your son, sort of like, well, I hope you don't mind if I go to this teaching, you know, and we have this feeling, I'm not saying this was your thought at all, I'm just using you as an example. And then we have this feeling like, but don't worry, I'll be back, it won't be that different. But you might be radically different. You may not be able to speak to that person in the same way anymore. You might not be able to live with that person anymore. You might not be able to, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. There's so many options. We don't want our relationships to change, but they must change as we change. So one way that you can help yourself in this process is to empower other people to have the changes that they need to have. And if you see other people in your life needing to make a transition, let them have it in relationship to you. And that can be very difficult, or it can be very easy. But it takes a lot of generosity, you know, to say, I see you're going somewhere and I want to help you go there. And that may mean that I don't see you anymore. In order for you to create the potential that when it's time for you to come to someone and say, for instance, I'm going into 3-year retreat, I might not see you for 3 years. They go, thank you for going into retreat. I'm so happy you're going, you know. Or you come to the moment where someone in your life is passing into their next realm, you can say, I love you, please go. It's your time to go. I'll see you again. Like Mahasukha says, I'll see you again. Not in this form, but I'll see you again for sure. So, you can know when you enter into meditation, there's this, I always talk about it with my students, like it's the turbulence of entering the atmosphere. You're going out of this atmosphere into another atmosphere, so there's definitely turbulence in that space. So just know that as you're entering and exiting meditation. So it's important on just a really practical level in your meditation practice to take time in those transitions. Don't jam yourself into meditation and don't jam yourself out, because you miss the possibility to integrate the experience that you've had, and as you're going in, you miss the possibility to treat your two brothers with kindness and to say, I hear you, I acknowledge whatever concerns you have, but like Mahasukha says, this is my destiny. I think I gotta go. So you want to let Mahasukha lead. So he goes in, and they all follow, right? And then they come upon the tiger. So I find this image so beautiful. And an image like this can be found in many stories where a feminine energy, the feminine energy is always wisdom. So here it's a mother tiger. And the tiger in traditional Indian mythology, that the tiger is power, that the tiger is like great strength. And we often say if you're really on your spiritual path, you say you're riding the tiger. And then we say don't fall off the tiger because the tiger will turn around and eat you. Right? So once you get on the tiger, you got to stay on the tiger. You got to stay on the tiger for as long as you go. You know, you can't get on a tiger and then decide like, oh, by the way, I don't think I like this ride. If you decide to get on the tiger, that's it. You're on the tiger. So, as Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche would say, like, don't even get on the tiger. You know, I heard recently that if you want to convert to Judaism, they make it really difficult. It's like that, you know. Just don't even get on the tiger. And that in a way is another way you know you're coming close. It seems a little counterintuitive, but you're coming close to a really good spiritual teaching if there's a lot of resistance around you. You know, it should be difficult. It should be difficult to get to a place where you transform, if the transformation is powerful. And if you look back again at those moments, sometimes it happens effortlessly, absolutely. But sometimes you can see, I remember I was trying to come to the center for one teaching with Lama Marut, with my teacher, and it was like everything was going wrong until the point where, my car broke down, and I found myself on the somehow Brian had driven separately, he was already here, and I was on the 405. I think I was on the 405, maybe I was still at home, but I was like calling a cab. I was just leaving my car. I was like calling a cab to get me down here, because I knew I could not be late to that teaching. If I was late, the door would close, that was it. It was like, the portal to the other realm was closing. And I could see the demons were like pulling me, and I was going like, I have to get in the room, And I like just got there, and as I got there, I saw his car pulling up, and I was like, yes, it was like sliding into the portal to get in. So this happens, it's difficult to get to these places often. And because we're lazy, and because we don't trust ourselves, when we encounter a little bit of difficulty, we go, oh, it's too hard. Never mind. Meh, I'll just stay home. I'll just watch it on Ustream or whatever it is, right? Instead, something else should kick in there where you go like, oh, you're going to try to take me down? No. I'm going. Whatever that is, I'm going to the teaching, I'm going to the thing, I'm going to do the meditation, No cell phone, you will not ring right now. So get a little fierceness in you, and that's how you get to the tiger. You gotta like meet the tiger with the fierceness. So they meet the tiger, and the tiger is a mother tiger, and again, this is the image of wisdom. So as Mahasukha, which is us, all of us, goes into his own inner mind, he sees that wisdom, because he has not been attending to wisdom, and he's not been caring for his inner wisdom, it is weak and dying. And of course, they all feel this. All the brothers feel this. The body, the speech, and the mind are all connected, okay? And they see the 5 cubs. Now, I won't go on for a long time about this at all. And again, this is something, if you're interested, you can ask Lauren or anyone else at the center, can you give a teaching on this? But the 5 cubs are related to the 5 wisdoms, what are called the 5 wisdoms. The 5 wisdoms are the transformation of the 5 parts of our being. In Buddhism, an ordinary suffering being is broken down into 5 parts, called the 5 heaps or the 5 skandhas. When one begins to transform their consciousness into the enlightened state, those ordinary 5 parts of ourselves, our form, our feelings, etc., those get transformed into wisdoms. Each of those wisdoms have a particular power. And each of those wisdoms are also related to the transformation of 5 main afflictions: desire, greed, anger, ignorance, doubt. What am I leaving out? Desire, greed, anger, ignorance.
I'm sorry,
Jealousy, thank you, jealousy. The 5 afflictions that are transformed into the 5 wisdoms. So he sees these 5 cubs. So wisdom, which is unnameable and unexperienceable from any being, individual being, you disappear when you meet the clear light, gives birth to the 5 wisdoms. The 5 wisdoms are the wisdoms that become embodied in our own being. So it's interesting here, this idea that either wisdom is going to die, the tiger is going to die, or the tiger is going to eat its own cubs. So there are all kinds of stories like this in the ancient teachings where the angels come down and they're about to offer a teaching, and they look around and they go, oh, no one's really ready for this. And they take it back. They re-eat what they were going to give birth to, because the space that they've come to is not laid ready to receive and nourish them. So we want to be able to sense within ourselves our own tiger. We all have this tiger inside. And our whole spiritual practice is to feed that tiger, like Mahasukha is feeding the tiger. Now, on one side, it is not it wouldn't, how to say this? It would be beneficial to take this story literally. That actually, this is a young man who fed himself to a tiger out of love. And that is possible. You know, I think if there's some part of our mind and some part of my telling that just stays in the metaphorical realm, we lose the real impact of the potential of this kind of action, of this kind of heart. And again, we see this heart, we hear stories about this kind of heart, and this is when the laws that bind us to this physical plane dissolve. So when Mahasukha gives himself to the tiger, again, the earth shakes in 6 ways. The sense objects of all the beings in the world are disoriented. The earth itself, who is a living being. The earth is a living being. We are living beings. We are the earth. The earth is alive. The earth itself is disoriented and shakes. The gods in the heavens, other realms, become the barrier that is usually blocked between this realm and other realms, dissolves, and the gods start to throw flowers down on the earth. Yeah? And then goddesses who are usually hidden appear and start to sing songs to you. Totally possible. Totally possible. Out of this kind of heart, only out of love, you see? So Mahasukha has connected to that one universal law, and he said, this is the only law I'm going to hold to now, is love. And because he gives himself completely to love, all the other boundaries dissolve. All the other realms become possible. The Buddha becomes possible. All the Buddha's disciples become possible. This teaching becomes possible. The sutra becomes possible. You all become possible. The U-stream becomes possible. All because of that. All because of that heart. And we all have that heart. Okay? So each in our own way, and as Master Shantideva says in the Guide to the Bodhisattva's Way of Life, just start with vegetables. Just start by giving people vegetables. You don't have to feed yourself to a tiger today if you're not ready. No problem, you know. And this also is important, is that in this story, this being, this mind, this consciousness, Mahasukha is a consciousness, is ready, is clear, has no doubt. We all have that kind of clarity. The being, the mind that says to the other brothers, excuse me, I have to return to the forest for a personal thing. So all of my attachment to my body, excuse me. All of my attachment to my relationships, my life, my whatever, job, etc. Excuse me. There's something else more important, as many of you spoke to, something higher than me that I have to attend to now. That part is clear. We all have that kind of clarity. So I don't want to confuse the issue by thinking that in those moments you might have doubt. The other brothers will have doubt, absolutely. But the being that goes back to the tiger has no doubt. And that is why it is possible to have that kind of action. Okay? This is why it's possible to have the methodical ritual of taking off your clothing, right? Which is another, you can also think about taking off the clothing as a whole practice, a whole part of your spiritual practice. So there's a point in our life where we're very clear where we're headed. I'm headed towards the tiger. Like you said to your son, got to go to this teaching. I'm going back into the forest. And again, that can be for years, lifetimes. You're going back in the forest towards the tiger. Okay? And it can happen in a split second. Part of that practice is you've got to remove all the clothing, all the labels that you've put upon yourself. In order to fully give yourself to the tiger, in order to have the real transformation of consciousness, you can't take the label with you. So there's that part of us that's like, that thinks, well, I remember thinking this when I got pregnant in the very beginning for like a split second. I thought, well, I can have a child and still do these other things. And no. Right? A friend of mine had a baby. She was unexpectedly, and not unexpectedly had the baby, but unexpectedly got, whoa! You hear stories about that, though. That's deep denial of the body. Deep denial. Anyway, so she was pregnant, and she said, She said, oh, it's great. It's just a side project. And even, I didn't have a child at the time, but I thought, oh boy, because there was that part of her mind, like, I could still have my career and I can still like have all these other things that I planned on. No. In these kinds of transformation, all that clothing has to go away. So this, in the beginning of the path, remember I was talking about the 5 paths and the beginning of getting clear on your interest? There's a word that we use in Buddhism, renunciation. That's part of that. Renouncing your attachment, that somehow you could change and stay the same. This is what holds us back from our highest transformations. We want them. We go towards them. We say, I want to reach the highest state of consciousness. I just don't want to change that much. And it's really important to acknowledge that and to have compassion for that part of ourselves, because those are our 2 brothers. Our brother who is afraid, and our brother who is anxious, who doesn't want to be separated from those that he loves, she loves. And we love those brothers. And, those are real feelings that you have to deal with. And they have good reasons. But don't let them take you over. If Mahasukha let the 2 brothers take him over, they'd never get to the tiger. We'd never have this teaching. The Buddha would never have appeared. Right? So you can identify for yourself. You can catch when your mind's like, yeah, I'll come to the teaching, but, not that much will change. I often get students telling me that way I notice it that students do is they tell me they'll come but they have to leave a little early, or they want to come but they need to come a little late. So you see, there's this sort of like carving out your own personal territory within the territory of the Dharma. We all do this, and I know I see it because I've done it, ad nauseum with my teacher, and no doubt continue to. Where it's sort of like, yes, I totally will surrender to you. I just want you to know that I have these things that I also need to attend to. And we don't even see the absurdity of it. We just, because our brothers are so strong in our mind that, all we're hearing is the voice of the brothers. So we don't even hear the absurdity. Say like, yes, I want ultimate transformation. I'm going to give, I want to surrender to God. I want to give myself up completely to love. I just don't want to love these 5 people in my life because they're really annoying. So I'll love everyone else, So just try to catch yourself and have a little sense of humor and just sort of go, oh boy, oh brothers, I love you, but, we got to be Mahasukha right now. We got to be the great being and go forward, So this moment of taking off the clothing, and something that I wanted to bring up here in this part of the story is that what Mahasukha does is he creates a ritual for himself. This is the not flying off the cliff version, okay? The flying off the cliff version is like, you hear Lama Marut's teaching, you go to the teaching, you're like, I'm going no matter what, whatever. You just go, okay? And if you encounter someone like this in your life, or maybe you've heard stories like this in your life, it's like the people who just disappear somehow, like they meet their teacher or they see their path and they just go. There's Bob Dylan wrote a song called, or actually it's not, I don't think it is a Bob Dylan song, The Man in the Long Black Coat. Do you guys know this song? Gone with the Man in the Long Black Coat. Did Bob Dylan write that song? Look it up. It's a great song. And he basically in the song, he says, he sings a song about this woman in this little outskirt dinky town, and this man in a long black coat appears, and she just disappears. And there's like laundry still hanging on the line, there's like dishes that haven't been washed, and she just cuts it and goes with the man in the long dark coat. And that to me has always been an emblem, a sort of a nice song that is an anthem of a spiritual practice, where you just go, oh, there's the man in the long black coat, see ya, you know. I mean, it could also be, of course, an anthem of death, but I like to see it as the Buddha. Same thing. Same thing. We fear death because we fear transformation, you see. If we didn't fear transformation, we would not be hesitant about spending our life preparing for our death, which is a great transformation to an unknown space. So same thing. You will not become enlightened and be in the same life. You will die to be reborn. You must. And this is scary, and particularly for Mahadeva, for the brother with the body. He doesn't want to let go of the body. So to create a ritual for yourself, when you are moving towards a process of transformation. So we have this within all our spiritual traditions. So for instance, Dima just gave vows, and there's a ritual that goes with vows. When you take vows, you go through a ritual. And this, it draws the power in. So we can all do this for whatever it is. If you're making a transformation in your life, whatever it might be, and it's towards your spiritual path, make a ritual out of it. You know how to do it. You'll know what to do. Just trust yourself. And no transformation too small. No change too small. I'm going to meditate today. Make a ritual out of it. We have, if you want to be taught rituals, we have them in the traditional Buddhist tradition and in the Christian tradition and Judaism and et cetera, et cetera. There's a reason why that is, because it creates a container of power for you that charges the situation. But you figure out what makes sense for you. Maybe the ritual is to, ring a bell a few times, or the ritual is, for you to drink a glass of water and sweep the floor, and every time you go in, you do the ritual, and some part of your mind goes, oh, we're going into that space now. And each time you go towards that space, your mind is more willing to go towards the space because the ritual gives you support, okay? Then there's this moment where he lays down with the tiger. And then he goes, okay, the tiger's too weak. The tiger isn't too weak. What is required of us is that we willingly give ourselves completely. We all have the part of ourselves that goes, I'll do this much, and then I want you to do the rest. You, God, you, Jesus, you, Lama, you, my husband, you, my wife, you, my mother, my father, you, my boss, whatever it is. You, myself, even. Okay? Wisdom requires you to give yourself utterly in order for the transformation to be complete. Because you see, if you're holding back a little bit of yourself, then you're still doing that thing where you're going, I'll change, but not that much. So you can't really make the passing. You can't make the crossing, okay? So he's got to go through the process of fully giving himself to the tiger. Then it can all happen. Then the transformation happens, the earth shakes, et cetera, right? And then lastly, and then I want to sort of have a conversation, but oftentimes I tell this story in the past, I've only told the first part. Partially because of time, but also because I personally was focused on that part. But as I go back again and again to this story, I am struck, and was particularly struck in this time, studying it again, that in the sutra, the Buddha spends just as much time, and actually less time, telling about the brothers, the story of the brothers and the tiger, as he does about the mourning of the loss of Mahasukha and the mourning of the parents. That's a huge part of the story. And so I asked myself, why is that? Here he's telling about this amazing moment of compassion, this amazing transcendent moment that this being, this consciousness is having, his own consciousness, our own consciousness. And then he says, but let me tell you about all of the pain that this caused everyone in his life. And I don't have the answers to this, but I just want to make a note of that. To say that I do know in my own path that there has been there has been a great deal of sadness for the me's that I have left behind, as I have left them behind. I have had no desire to go back at all, but that doesn't mean that I haven't felt the loss of those beings. And I haven't felt the loss of certain relationships, or I haven't felt the loss of things that I like to do, that I actually don't like to do anymore, but I have the habit of liking to do them. So I miss them, you see? It's just habit. I recognize it as habit, but it doesn't mean that I don't feel like, oh, it was so nice when I could just like kick around and go to a movie, or whatever it is, you know? So to me, that's maybe part of the reason why he's offering this space of mourning. But I think also that there's something to consider, that other people in your life may not understand your path, and they may not support your path. When the Buddha was born, there's the story that the priest came to his parents and said, the shaman, the seer, came to his parents and said, oh, this child has two possible destinies. This child could be a great world emperor, a great king. Or this child could be a penniless monk who reaches enlightenment. What do you think the parents wanted him to be? The king. Parents were like, awesome, we had a king. You know, no parent wants to hear your child's going to go off in the woods, you know, be totally naked, stop eating, you know, disappear, you're never going to see them anymore, and like they're not going to talk to you, and no one's going to know them, and you know, maybe they'll reach enlightenment, maybe they won't. You know? No, it's like, no, I want them here next to me. I want to go. Look at my child, the king. I'm so proud of my child, you know. So not only do we have that within ourselves, we have that part of ourself that wants to watch ourself become enlightened because we want to be the king. So we all have the part of ourself that's going, I could be the king or I could be enlightened. And we have our own parents, our own mental affliction parents, our desire and our anger that's going, I want to watch myself get enlightened, but that's really watching yourself become the king, you see. So we want, hopefully, we want to move towards the enlightened mind, and the enlightened mind you can't take possession over, you're going to go away. So there will certainly be beings in your life who are attached to you, who love you, who want you to stay the same, not because they really want to thwart your spiritual journey, but just because they love you and they want you to stay the same, and they don't want to give you up. And you want to deal very compassionately and kindly with those beings, but you also need to keep going towards the tiger. And it's probably helpful to speak with others who are going through that process to find out how to do it, and to how to be kind to the people around you. So just know that there will be mourning, and then there will be the parts of yourself that can't hold what's happening, that will black out. I love that part of the story so much. I have had this with friends, and I don't know if you personally have, where I might share something with them about my journey or my path, and it is as if they simply don't hear an entire portion of what I have said to them. And sometimes I've repeated it multiple times. And finally I realized they can't hear it. And so I stopped trying to tell them about it in that way. And there are parts of our own self. Everything needs to be reflected back into the inner kingdom, because it's not just about what's out here. What is out here is what's happening in here. Say that again, because it's how it works. What's happening out there is what's happening in here. So in our own selves, there are parts of our transformation that your current mind cannot hold, and you will black out to yourself. Maybe literally. You might actually literally black out. Or you'll just pass through a space where it's like, I have no idea what happens. Like that guy, I don't know how I got to Mahasukha. I don't even know what the Mahasukha Center is. I got in my car and somehow I drove here, and who are you and what am I listening to? It might not be that extreme, it might be more subtle, but we pass in and out of these spaces, and part of our work is to become increasingly conscious of the parts of ourself that our consciousness cannot hold. Now that sounds impossible, But the awakened mind is conscious of all things, including all that is unconscious. And I'll just give a little hint to say that the way that works is not to try to pull that material into the smaller mind of what you currently know, or the way you currently explain things. So the part that your mind cannot currently hold, the blackout parts of your mind, and in some ways you could just say the ignorance, the parts that you're ignoring, which are the wisdom parts of yourself, it doesn't, so here's your normal mind that you know, everything you know, and here's everything that has yet to be realized in your mind. It doesn't work this way. I pull you up and try to stuff you into the mind that I currently have. It's got to go the way Jenny and others were speaking. My mind has to expand to encompass new possibilities. So this feeling of spaciousness that Lori was talking about, really important. You probably all have your own version of this. But when you feel your heart open, when you feel your mind open, when you feel more space being created, that's a tip that you're going towards the bringing into consciousness that which is currently unconscious within yourself, so that you can become more realized. Does that make sense to everyone? And then there's a process of integration, as I was speaking about before. There's a process of integration where you figure out then how to share that material in your daily life. Figure out how to translate it into words or not, if it's not appropriate to translate into words. You figure out how to go through your day, your way of being changes, your body changes, what you eat will change, what you speak will change, how you see other people will change. Eventually your world will look nothing like it looked like before. And yet in some ways it will be what you've always known. It'll be the world you've always known, but it'll be totally different than the world that you knew. And this happens in little ways, in little ways, in little ways, until you suddenly go, wow. Just like aging. In little ways, in little ways, in little ways, you'll get me, you're like, whoa, right? It's helpful to age. It's helpful to age to recognize the way we can transform. Slowly, stealthily, over time. Doesn't always have to just happen like that, right? Our spiritual practice daily, you come to your meditation cushion step by step by step, and then one day you go, oh, I'm enlightened. Just snuck up on me. After 50 billion lifetimes of practice. Oh, right? So I've said plenty. I'd love to hear if people have questions or comments or thoughts or anything anyone's. Yeah, please.
Well, I had a thought. I know we talked about like transfer. This thing that's going and change, is constantly happening if we're not going back. But just like how sometimes your mind will block out things, like I've noticed that sometimes my body will also block out things like people. And so, but when I was younger, I remember just being more open to people and being able to experience them and feel them and take them all in and not have that much blockage. Yeah. And so sometimes I feel like, okay, I want to go back to that, but body-wise. And that's like a change that has to happen. And I'm just like wondering, like, well, but is that going backwards or is it still going forward? Like,
yeah,
you know what I mean?
Yeah, no, thank you. Such a beautiful thing to bring up. So two things with that. So there's horizontal time and there's vertical time or eternal time. When I talk about you won't go back, that's on a horizontal timeline. Now, in the moment, in the story, the Buddha says, and this is such an important part of teaching, and thank you so much for saying this because I missed speaking about this.
When he says, Ananda, if you think that that happened then and this is happening now, don't think like that. This is the same time. So You who were that child and open like that is also right now. Could be right now. And you can give yourself that by calling that back up to mind, going back into that space, remembering what that felt like in your body, conjuring it up, and then setting an intention, like Mahasukha does in the story, really helpful to set intentions and say, I have an intention now to move back out into the world with that kind of body. But then along with that, to ask yourself, what are the reasons? Why did you stop acting like that? Because if you don't address those, you will never feel safe to reopen those pathways. Does that make sense? There were reasons why you closed them down. And some of them, all of them, no doubt, were really good reasons at the time. But what I'm hearing, which is so beautiful, is that you're acknowledging that there was a space that you once inhabited, and now as a mature adult, you won't go back to being a child. You won't go back to being a child, but the quality that you're speaking of, you can absolutely re-inhabit. But you'll re-inhabit it as a mature adult, which will be different. And so there's a knowing that you have now as an adult, and part of that knowing closed you down. You can now make a mark in your mind and say, I'm ready to reopen those places in my being. And how can I do that? Because they're still there. The pathways aren't gone. They're still there. But again, if one, you think, well, let me go back to being a child, that's not going to happen. Or two, if you think, I'm just going to be open. Sometimes we're like, I'm just going to be free. Just be free. Have you tried it? So just try. I'm just going to be free. I'm just going to love everyone. I got it now. And all these habits in your being are like, oh, hell no, you're not going to love everyone. Absolutely not. So you got to deal with those parts of yourself, right? And you have to, and the way you deal with them is compassionately. So you say, specifically, thank you for talking about the body. So you sit down and you say, well, maybe I feel a tightness in my heart. Where did that come from? Notice, and then start to track yourself really assiduously through the day and note, when does your heart contract and when does it expand? And when it's contracting, take a step back like an anthropologist and go, what's happening right now? Am I afraid? Why am I afraid? Who's afraid? Or am I embarrassed? Who's embarrassed? Oh, I think I'm separate from you. Oh, I think you're judging me. Oh, I'm judging you. Or whatever it is, right? And see what's happening. And then from that mature mind, the mind that's so beautifully speaking and saying, I'm ready to be open again, you could say, well, I feel judged right now and I feel my heart closing, but what if I do an experiment and I extend myself in compassion to this person? Or whatever it is, however it makes sense to you, right? Does that? So if you think that time and this time is different, don't think like that. It's all available. And, which is why I said expand your timeline. If you think that this time and the future time, when whatever you think is going to happen in the future, which for most of us in this room is, I will get enlightened at some point, right? I will reach my highest consciousness, I'll become an angel, whatever it is, right? Whatever your vision is of your spiritual development, if you think that time and this time is different, don't think like that. That time and this time are the same time. Okay? What else? Yes, sir.
It's a very powerful teaching. And I've had a practice for quite some time, and I do meditate regularly. And 9 days ago, my dad passed away, and I'm really dealing with not really knowing. I mean, my spiritual path has been great, like the transformations I've experienced, and I love the practice that I have. And, I've been going through my own practicing and not practicing and not being as diligent as I want to. And watching my dad pass was pretty intense. I mean, probably the most intense thing I've ever witnessed in my life. And you talk about this blackout, and I think, like, I haven't meditated for 2-3 weeks. I haven't even sat on the cushion. I find myself being afraid to go sit on the cushion. Because I don't know how to be. I don't know. It's so, I'm afraid of what I will find. And I'm like just piecing together, like, everyone says I'm sorry for your loss. And I feel like I'm in this blackout. Like, I don't know anything anymore. And I have this like thing in the back of my head, like, I should be meditating, I should be doing, like, there's all these shoulds, right? And I went to dinner last night with Brian, and I had this moment of like, well, I'm having the biggest spiritual teaching of my entire life, and it's not, I want to figure it out, and I can't do it, and I'm dealing with like being unattached, but yet I am, and letting him go. I mean, in the final hours of him being here, both my brother and I were attacked. Like, we had to deal with helping him to let go. Now, how do you help someone let go when you don't want them to go? And I don't even know what I'm saying, but it's so good to be here, because I'm not going to get off the tiger. I know that, like, I know I'm on the tiger. But I feel like I'm taking some break, like, and I don't have a lot of compassion for myself, because I'm like, it should be some particular, my spiritual past needs to look a particular way. And I'm just, I guess it's just good to be here to receive the teaching and get that I'm not my thoughts, and I'm not, it doesn't have to be a particular way, it's perfect the way it is, and yeah.
Thank you. We'll have this space where we can miss the teaching because we're so focused on what we think the teaching is supposed to look like, or feel like, or sound like. And when we are in the space of the blackout, when we're in that moment between selves, between worlds, it's a type of bardo, if you know this term, between. And we're always actually between. There's one beautiful teaching in Buddhism where they name all the different betweens. Between life and death, between death and the next life, between this Bardo life and your rebirth, so you can mark any moment in your life and you're between some space. We just focus on life, death, but there are continual betweens, because we're always becoming, because we're always changing. So in one sense, we're always in the blackout. We're always in the between. But then, of course, we can mark that in order to have a between, there are two things you're between, right? So when you are in that space, in that place of transformation, where all that you've known has dissolved, things become fluid again, things become possible again. It's such a valuable space. And I note that we are always in that space. We're always in a between, because Mark is having this powerful moment right now with the passing of his father. But we're always in a space like that. It doesn't have to be something that extreme in our life in order to connect with this dissolution of ourselves. There's always a space for that. When everything dissolves and we become fluid again, fear can come because we feel the groundlessness of our space. And because we have the illusion of having some ground most of the time, we create the illusion of ground. When we touch base with the truth of our groundlessness, from the vantage point of the being who was creating ground, we become afraid. But that is our true nature, is groundless, is fluidity. And all the shoulds that are coming up in our mind, as Mark is speaking about, are sort of like you're leaving the shore and you're looking at the people on the other shore going like, hey, all those like, come back, all those reminders of who you were. When you pass through the Bardo, when you pass through the blackout and you come back, it's important to allow things to be different. Just the practice of allowing things to be different. Your practice will change. What do you think? You're always going to do the same meditation for the rest of your life? Or do you think like you always have to set up your seat in a particular way? Or, we get so attached to these things we know. I remember actually with Brian once, I was sharing something with him and I was saying, and then as soon as you get comfortable with this one teaching, it's going to change. You'll get a different teaching. And Brian was like, why? Why do that? It's like, because it's trying, the sense of becoming comfortable and settling in is ignorance atrophying and going, oh, now I understand. Now I have a good meditation practice, or now I have a good spiritual practice. That's why you choose a teacher, is so the teacher comes in and knocks you out of that comfort zone constantly. Because we're not so good at knocking ourselves out of our own comfort zone. We don't really like to do it, But as you progress along your spiritual path, actually you get better and better. You become an expert of saying, and you start to go, oh, I feel really comfortable. Uh-oh. Like, what's going on here? And then you start to be able to discern, again, the comfort of peace, the comfort of realization from the comfort of stagnation, the comfort of your status quo self closing down, like you're speaking about your body closing down. That's different from the comfort of the opening and the love starting to flow through you, right? So you're in this space and you're having these shoulds come up. Let them fall away. I don't know how your practice is going to change. You don't know how your practice is going to change. You don't know. What a great space to be in. You don't know. That's the space for wisdom to rush in. That is the space of wisdom. Right? You may meditate again, you may never meditate again in that way. Right? We don't give ourselves a lot of leeway for that kind of change because we have this idea of what it's supposed to look like. So it can be helpful to remind yourself that
when you feel those shoulds, you just say, why? I should meditate, why? And then again, maybe you have a good reason why. But I would never ever want you to meditate because you should meditate. I would want you to meditate because you want to meditate. You know, the kind of the should only gets you so far. And it can be helpful in the very beginning of a spiritual practice to kind of galvanize that part of yourself that's like, I want to be a good person. I should be nice to this person even though I don't like them. I should do this. I should do that because that's what nice people do. And actually that can be a useful part of your practice, to be honest. But not for too long. Because if you're staying in that part at a certain point, the part's going to be like, I should, but I don't care. You know? So while that part is working, if that part is working in you, you want to try to touch base with the deeper desire that we call bodhicitta, the desire that is the unimpeded flow of your longing to come to your own integration with your highest self. And there's nothing that should. There's nothing should there. There's I must, I will, I have to. And in fact, it will be against all the other shoulds probably in your life. Yeah, but you should wash the dishes, and you should do this, and you should do that. That's fine, but I am going to do this. I will do this, right? It's so, look for that feeling, and trust it. And it's like, I should go be with my brother. I should be with Michelle. I should go out to dinner with Brian. Or I'm sorry, not I should, but I will. I must. I have to do that right now. Then that's what you do. All the shoulds don't matter right now. They only matter when you're so disconnected from the fluid blackout space, from the wisdom space, from the teaching, that you need that kind of structure to say, Mark, you should meditate. Mark, you should go to teachings. And again, that can be helpful. Sometimes we pull out and we need that mind. We need to be our own good parent. But as I'm learning with my son, they're just going to do what they want to do. So every once in a while, the child will listen to you, but then, they're just going to do what they want to do. So you better figure out what it is you really want. And again, those of you that are studying Buddhism, that's called bodhicitta. To really come in contact with, I want to become enlightened. And figure out what that means for you. What else? Yes, sir. Yes, Dave.
How do you know when you're making a teacher into a brother or a parent, and the tiger leads you to a new path? You want to be good students, which is a label. When is that a piece of clothing to take off?
Can you read it again, please? Louder.
How do you know when you're making your teacher into a brother or a parent, and the tiger leads you to a new path? You want to be good students, which is a label. When is that a piece of clothing to take off?
That's my teacher writing this question. So clearly there's a teaching in there for me. Well, one thing I think is when you are with a teacher, and a teacher can be a person, a teacher can be a situation, a teacher can be a place. But when you are with a teacher in a proper way, and I say proper not in some kind of sense of, ethical, like puritanical ethicalism or something. I say proper in the sense of meaning your spiritual path will function well if you work this way with your teacher. There should be love there. Love that is unconditional. It's natural to want to try to please your teacher, but at a certain point that has to go. So when I think about the teacher becoming a brother, and you can correct me if I'm off, but I'm thinking that he means the teacher, that feeling of going towards the tiger sort of gets co-opted by one of the other brothers, right? Or by the parents who want you to stay close. So if you are focused on pleasing that being in a way that then you feel like you're getting something back from it. So in other words, you're relating to your teacher for yourself. Then your ego has started to co-opt the relationship. So you're starting to go to your teacher to feel good, or you're going to your teacher because you want your teacher to like you, or you're going to your teacher because whatever it is you want your teacher to save you, or you're looking for some result. Instead of simply coming to your teacher to serve your teacher, to serve your teacher being the highest part of yourself. So when you are with your teacher, you are seeking to serve that being, that situation, that place, whatever it is, with no expectation of getting anything back. That's hard. But that's the practice. That's the first thing that comes to mind. Part of the gift of working with a teacher is that if it's working properly, we're learning how to love unconditionally. That is the way the teacher loves you. Part of your role as a student is to make an agreement in your own best interest to say that this person, whoever it is, whatever it is, loves me unconditionally, is here only to serve my path, needs nothing from me. And again, just like in the beginning of the story, by setting that being up in that way, they begin to act that way for you. You see, you're doing it all yourself. It has nothing to do with that person out there. Who knows what they're doing in their own mind? If you could read their mind, then you're already enlightened, and then you are the teacher, okay? So you don't really know what's going on in that person's mind, but you have some kind of, as people were saying in the beginning of class, you have that feeling of trust, or you have that feeling of spaciousness, or you have some feeling like this is the right person to go towards, this is the right path, this is the right whatever. So you say, in my own best interest, I'm going to say, this being is totally enlightened, this being has an unending stream of love towards me, and whatever I see coming from them is love. So what does that mean when the person pisses you off? What does that mean when the person bothers you? What does that mean when the person asks you to do something you don't like? How is that love? You have to work it out, you see. But you've made the agreement. If you make the agreement, then you start to make it work. And then these amazing things start to happen, okay? And as that process goes, you become closer and closer to starting to love unconditionally. You get closer and closer to the being that you want to be through serving the image of the being you want to be. Am I making sense? Okay. So I think one of the ways that we make the teacher a brother or a parent in that way that blocks us is that we expect something from them. We go to them looking for them to affirm something that we already want or we already know. And when they don't, then we get upset and we reject them. If they do, then we like them. That's also very problematic. To notice that actually you like your teacher just because they affirm things in you that you want them to affirm. And then when they don't, you get angry. But the teacher stays there. The teacher's unwavering. And if you have a good teacher in body or in your own view, both, externally in body and in your own view, they won't leave you. The teacher will never leave you. They'll stay. And one of the ways my teacher, Lama Marut, speaks about it is the teacher makes an agreement for you just to throw all your crap against them. And they don't move, they're unwavering. You throw your crap and the crap slides off. You throw more crap, the crap slides off. They're still there. You keep trying, until eventually you've thrown all your crap away. And the teacher is solid, so the crap just keeps, and then there you are. You're crapless, and you're facing the being who is always crapless. Very articulate way of speaking back. Does anybody else have any ideas about that? Yes? Yeah.
But I think sometimes when you're teaching and you're taking all this crap, that sometimes you can affirm that your student is no longer kind of really needing you as much, and they're kind of going on their own way.
Yeah.
I sometimes throwing crap at them and having them
Yes.
teach you, even though you already, really knew. And
Yeah.
they teach themselves that they are teaching themselves.
Yeah.
They're continuing.
Yeah.
That's-
Yeah. No, thank you. It's beautiful. It reminds me that actually we use this term teacher a lot. But I want to make a small distinction because it might be beneficial in this moment. A teacher needs a student, and a student needs a teacher. There is a need there in that relationship. A guru, an enlightened being, does not need a student. A guru is complete. We as students, we look for a guru so that we can come into the realization of our own inherent completeness. So if we put ourselves in the position of student and teacher, and we see those roles as separate, we're missing the point. They have never been separate. When they are realized as not being separate, we move into the realm of the guru, of the enlightened being. And this is the path of guru yoga, of taking a teacher, is that in the beginning, of course, you're like, I'm the student, you're the teacher, you're so great, I'm not so good, I'm trying to get better, I want to be like you. And you see yourself as different. And if you have a good teacher, from the very beginning, the teacher will say, there's no difference here. There's no difference here. And as a teacher, if any of you, I know many of you in this room do teach and are in the role of teacher, you have to be honest with yourself where you are. But a teacher in the highest sense has no students. They don't need any students. And they're not a teacher. They're both simultaneously all the time. Okay? So those of us who are in the role in this kind of world as teachers, our students are our teachers. And we are their students, and vice versa. So there's that beautiful fluidity there. So when you're working with a teacher, I would ask you to try to see that teacher as a guru. And that can be, again, it disorients us. Maybe the last thing to say for today, again, about this disorientation. We have this trope in our relationships. We want to feel like the person wants to be with us, needs to be with us. We look for that in our relationships. For someone to say, I love you, I want you, I need you. That's ignorance. That's someone who can't stand on their own, you see. That means that, and then if we go, that's so great, you love me so much, you need me, then you're affirming someone's poverty. Why would you do that to someone that you love? Why would you want someone to need you like that? That means that they can't, they have no richness in themselves. They need you to fill them, you see? So we have this idea, we have this weird romantic idea in our life that a good relationship is when the other person needs us. And a guru is there to cut that shit off. because that is suffering. To say, you do not need anything from me, and I do not need anything from you. And to be in the room with someone who truly doesn't need anything from you is very disconcerting. And I've spoken with this about my students. It's described very beautifully in this book, Cave in the Snow, about Tenzin Palmo, this woman Tenzin Palmo, who's a nun, beautiful being, spent many years in retreat. And the interviewer in the very beginning of the book says, when she first came to know her, she had this feeling like she was with someone who was so happy to be with her, but if she left, wouldn't make any difference in her life. So she felt this, like the interview would come and go. It didn't really make any difference to Tenzin Palmo. Tenzin Palmo was there and was like, oh, great to see you. Oh, you're not there anymore. It's a beautiful day. You know, sort of like come and go. And that's that rock. That's that presence that I'm speaking about. That's that unconditional love. So we have a definition of love, most of us, I should say, define love and experience love as something conditional. That's what we think love is. And we enact that and embody that throughout our life. As we move in our spiritual teaching, we come to the higher law of love. That's an unconditional law. That's the law that dissolves all the other laws that are conditional laws. All the other laws that I was talking about, gravity, this feeling of separation, the feeling that time is linear, et cetera, all the laws of the physical plane and the physical realm, those are conditional laws. And those conditional laws dissolve in the presence of the unconditional law of love and graciousness. Divine, God, Buddha, Tao, essence, whatever we want to put language to, that which cannot be named. When you're working with a teacher, that is the essence you're trying to call forth. That's the essence that you agree to see in the other being. And therefore, you bring it forth in yourself. And in time, all the other conditional laws disappear. And all that you've heard and all the stories, all the fantastical possibilities that you hear about, all become possible. Because they're all just conditional illusions that function at different levels of consciousness in different realms. So try to be that for other people. Try to be that unconditional space. It's hard. It's hard. This is the work of the spiritual path. This is the work of the spiritual transformation, to not need something from other people in that way. On a day-to-day relative level, that's really not what I'm talking about. Like if your car breaks down, you need a mechanic or something like that, okay? You know, or like you live with people or whatever, you know, it's like you need someone's help. You know, if you've fallen down, you need someone's help to get you up. That's not what I'm talking about. Are you guys with me? I just want to make that important distinction, because then people get into that weird space where they sort of go, I don't need anything from anyone. I don't need you. That's not what I'm talking about. Because actually the person who is not in need in the higher way is very comfortable accepting help and can very easily say, I need your help in that relative sort of day-to-day space. So try to be that unconditional presence for others, and try to see that other people are loving you in that way, and come against all of the challenges of doing that and try to work it out, so that you can create a world where you're living in that one law, in that highest law, where everything is that unconditional love. And that's going to mean that you let go of the attachment to people liking you. And you let go of your attachment to liking other people in that way, or to disliking other people, or having other people dislike you. Yes, last thing.
Just because of what you were saying, I think there's a kind of a word to add in there that will shed a different kind of light on the idea of need and completeness versus separation, which is interdependence.
Yes.
So when it seems to me, when you have a clear sense of interdependence, that we do depend on each other.
Yes.
For you know, I mean, there is no, as you there is no me without you,
Yeah.
because you are. That's why I am. And lots of things. But within that, and if there is an awareness of that, then the separation breaks down, and then there is no I need this from you.
Right.
So that it seems to me that the idea of need, of what you get, of what you give, breaks down
Yes.
with that sense of interdependence, so that there is a sense of connection and unconditional love, even without this sense, or especially or because of not having this sense of need
Yeah.
and separation.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah.
And that again goes to that moment in this says, you know, if you think that that was that person and now I'm this person, don't think like that. There's no separation there. So if you go into those moments in your life that you wrote down, just one is all you need, right? You can make it a regular practice and just know that it's there for you. That feeling of openness that everyone has had at some point in their life, where that unconditional space rises, it's there for you, it's always there for you. And the practice is to seek to stabilize and to live there more and more and more and more. And no one needs to teach you how to do that. You know how to do that. It can be helpful to have a teacher to remind you again and again and again in lots of different ways. It can be helpful to have a sangha, a group of people who are also trying to do the same to support you. But you all know what you need to do, and you all know how to do it. No question about it. I firmly believe this about everybody. Everybody has the clarity that Mahasukha has that goes back to the tiger. Everybody has that clarity. No one is unclear about what they truly wish for in their heart. We all have many obstacles. We all have many shoulds. We all have many habits that draw us away. And the work is to go through those lovingly, compassionately, but with a firmness and a fierceness. To say there's something more important than this habit or this should. There's a law higher than that. So, thank you for coming and thank you for sharing space, but, let's end on this note of interdependence and completeness, that each of us in this room we're complete. We're together. We can help each other. We will help each other. But not because anybody in this room needs help from anyone else. You all know what to do, and you all know how to do it. So we can help inspire each other to keep moving towards our highest good. So maybe let's just close with a dedication to say, let's do that. That's a dedication. Let's do that. Close your eyes for a moment. And so again, reconnect with that open spaciousness, whether you're identifying it as the unknown, that kind of blackout space, or the other side of that coin, which is the clear light, the knowing, that most intelligent force within your heart. Two sides of the same coin. And make a prayer that through being here today, you can become ever closer and ever more integrated with that space, and that you will be able to see it more clearly, more directly in others, that you can allow yourself to be nourished by it in others and to nourish others with it. And that you can rest there in that highest law, that one law of love that binds us all, that connects us all. And then as you make your transition out of this formal part of the class, please be mindful. Make this transition in a mindful way. Think about what it is that you'd like to carry forward from the class. How do you want to be? How do you want to move into the world? And let that be a nice catalyst for your tiger ride. So thank you again to everyone for coming, making time in your day to share time. And thank you to Dima for working this. Thank you for everyone who's been online, and thank you to everyone at the center. And I will probably leave fairly quickly. It's because I have a long drive back to my baby, but I'll write my email up here for those of you that don't have it, and you're all welcome to contact me anytime if you have questions or you just want to talk, and we can set up a time to meet or whatever it is that you might need.